Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I think that covers all the times of the day. Thank you for being here, wherever you're coming from. And before settling in, maybe this is the first time sitting today, or maybe you've already sat a few times. It's always just nice to move a bit, maybe a little stretch, a little shake, a little feel around, adjusting. Yeah, I always find that really nice to do. Sometimes we can be a little bit too rigid um, in our practice, and so bringing some fluidity and lightness into it. And then we just breathe a few times. Nice long inhales and exhales. Even letting out a few sighs. Body, I found the body likes to make noise. Uh, we'll be doing that through chanting, but it's okay to sigh. And then just feeling into the contact of the seat with the ground, wherever you're in contact with the ground, if you're lying down, the feet or the seat. Just drawing your attention to that place. Sometimes in my practice, I'll actually hold my attention there for quite a while. And we can allow the attention to just move through the physical body. Sweeping the awareness through. Bringing attention to perhaps some places that we typically don't. Maybe the back body, or the inside of the rib cage, or the pinky toes. Noticing the state of the mind. Notice the breath in the body. Drawing attention to just the internal experience of breathing. Internal experience of the body. And then we can notice the place where the body meets the external environment. So noticing the clothing against the skin, or the air against the skin. Up into the senses. Feel out into space. Feeling out of the front, out of the sides, out of the back. Feeling below, feeling above, and then in all directions. Let's take a fairly deep inhale through the nose, filling up, and let the air go. And again, inhale. And exhale. And again, inhale. And as you exhale, just slowly open the eyes, perhaps bring the palms together, a little bow, bowing to the Sangha. All right, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you all for being here for the Sacred Mountain Sangha Sunday Sit. A lot of S's there. My name is Adam Stonebraker, and I'm one of the core teachers with Sacred Mountain Sangha. And if we haven't met, it's a pleasure to meet you, and welcome to everyone. So how this will work is we'll do some chanting, and then we'll do some sitting, and then I'll share some Dharma words at the end. We officially end at 1 o'clock, but if you'd like to stay on until 1:15, that's an opportunity to just discuss Dharma or ask any questions or any insights you'd like to share afterward. So that's the rhythm. I'm also going to share the chant book with you. So this is sort of the direct link to the chant book, but then I'll also send you an indirect link. That's actually the website that the chanting book is on, because I know some people have been struggling with opening that one. So two avenues in. If neither one of those work, you can just let me know, and I can share my screen or something. And we'll be beginning. Let's see, I think it's on page 3, the very top. And we'll start with honoring the Buddha, Namo Tassa. And then we'll take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And then we'll move on to page 4, the recollection of the triple jewel, Itipiso. Okay. Honoring the Buddha. The Buddha suggested that we honor that which is worthy of honor. And so honoring the teacher, the Buddha, but also honoring our own nature of awakening, our awake nature, our luminous nature here. So let's exhale together. Inhale. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Udam saranam gacchami. Dhammang saranam gacchami. Sangha saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi buddham saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi dhammang saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi sanghang saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi buddham saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammang saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi sanghang saranam gacchami. Recollection of the triple jewel. Yetipiso bhagava araham samma sambuddho bija charana sampano sugato bogavidu vanutaro purisadama sarati sata deva manusanam buddho bhagavanti sabhakato Bhagavata Dhammo Sanditiko Akadiko Ehipasiko Opanayiko Pachatam Vedita Bhovinu Iti Supatipano Bhagavato Sabakasango Ujupatipano Bhagavato Sabakasango Naya Patipano Bhagavato Sabakasango Sami Chipatipano Bhagavato Sabakasango Yadidam Chattari Purisayogania Tapurisapugala Esa Bhagavato Sabakasango Ahnayo, Pahnayo, Dakinayo, Anjali, Karaniyo, Anutaraham, Punyakitam Loka Sati. Just take a pause here. Just take a pause here. To acknowledge these chants. These chants going all the way back to the time of the Buddha. This language, these syllables that have vibrated through millions and millions of practitioners over thousands of years. You can acknowledge the roots of our practice, South Asia, within India, Nepal. And all the millions of practitioners over the years who sacrificed their lives or dedicated their lives to bring teachings to keep this practice alive through lots of hardship, spreading the teachings to China and Tibet and even east into Afghanistan, the west into Afghanistan and east into Thailand and Laos and Cambodia, Japan, and Korea, eventually coming to Europe and United States of America. And all over the world. So much gratitude to the lineages and the practitioners over all these years. So let's go to page 11, the Heart Sutra. Chant in English, and it's a little bit more free form. But Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara is Kuan Yin, Tibetan Chinrezig, the same being. Now let us chant the heart of Prajnaparamita Sutra. When Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara was practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, she illuminated the 5 skandhas and saw that they are all empty, and she crossed beyond all suffering and difficulty. Shariputra, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. Form itself is emptiness. Emptiness itself is form. So too are feeling, cognition, formation, and consciousness. Shariputra, all dharmas are empty of characteristics. They are not produced, not destroyed, not defiled, not pure, and they neither increase nor diminish. Therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, feeling, cognition, formation, or consciousness. No eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, or mind. No sights, sounds, smells, tastes, objects of touch, or dharmas. No field of the eyes up to and including no field of mind consciousness. And no ignorance or ending of ignorance. Up to and including no old age and death or ending of old age and death. There is no suffering, no accumulating, no extinction, and no way, and no understanding and no attaining. Because nothing is attained, the Bodhisattva, through reliance on Prajnaparamita, is unimpeded in her mind. Because there is no impediment, she is not afraid, and she leaves distorted dream thinking far behind. Ultimately, nirvana. All Buddhas of the 3 periods of time attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi through reliance on Prajnaparamita. Therefore, know that Prajnaparamita is a great spiritual mantra, a great bright mantra, a supreme mantra, an unequaled mantra. It can remove all suffering. It is genuine and not false. That is why the mantra of Prajnaparamita was spoken. Recite it like this. Gatte, gatte, paragatte, parasamgatte, bodhiswaha. And then we'll go on to the next page, the Great Compassion Mantra. Either 12 or 13. And some of our chant books differ. Namo Dabe Namo Halla Danno Dolaye Namo Aliye Polu Jiri Shambo Laye Buddhi Santo Paye Moa Sato Paye Jaruni Jayen Dansa Panna Faye Sora Noda Shinamo Shijiri Toi Mongaliye Polu Jiri Shirfola Langdo Ban Namo Nola Shiri Moha Panda Samme Sappa Ritta Shupanga Shayun Sappa Sado Namo Pasado Namo Pache Moha Dajatanana Parushi Rujani Jalari Shiri Moha Buddhi Santo Sappa Sappa Mola Mola Mushi Mushi Doyun Juru Juru Jimam Duru Duru Vashairi Moa Vashairi Tola Tola Dilini Laye Jalla Jalla Momo Pamula Murili Ishi Ishi Shurno Shurno Wala Shan Buddha Shili Pasha Pashan Buddha Shaye Hulu Mola Hulu Hulu Shiri Sola Sola Shiri Shiri Sulu Sulu Buddhi 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 Midiri Nola Ginger Diri Shiny No Payamono Supa Shito Supa Moha Shito Supa Shito Yui Sherpanaye Nola Ginger Supa Mola Nola Supa Shiru Sangha Mujoye Supa Supa Moha Shitoye Supa Jajila Shitoye Poromoje Shitoye Supa Nola Ginger Panjelaye Supa Mubari Shangjelaye Supa Namo Halla Danno Dolaye Aliye Polu Jidi Shambolaye Supahanan Chidandu Mandola Bado Ye Supaha Namo Quan Yin Usaona Mo Quan Yin Usa Enamo Quan Yin Usaona Just settle in. Another, another sit here. Just allowing the vibration, the chanting to lead us into stillness, silence. Feel free to stretch and adjust and or continue sitting if you'd like to. I'm just going to share some Dharma words with you. And what I'd like to share is something I've been thinking about uh, lately is just our motivation for practice. Why do we practice? And the more I think about this, the more important it kind of becomes for me. Because it really encompasses the whole of the Dharma. Why do we practice? And not just why do we practice, but what is our motivation behind how we live in general as Dharma people, if we want to call ourselves that, as people who are here to become more awake, um, who are trying to live life um, in the most skillful way as possible. And I found that examining motivation is a really powerful, potent, and important way to begin to examine um, truly, what's at the very, very center of my experience, why I do what I do. And so the motivation to practice, the motivation for the words we speak, for the actions that I take, the motivation for everything I do, where is it coming from? And I think it's really skillful how the Buddha kind of crafted the Eightfold Path, because right view comes first and then right intention comes after right view. And so if you take that to be a path to be walked in order, um, then it's necessary to have a correct view, and out of correct view naturally comes a right intention or a wise intention. But motivation, I feel, is a little bit different than intention. And so I can sit down for practice, and my intention might be to work on concentration, or to develop insight, or to work on my heart, or different things like that. But if I'm sitting down to work on concentration, what is the purpose behind that? Like, why am I doing that? So motivation sort of gets underneath intention in a way. And so motivation includes desire. It's kind of like intention with desire. What is my underlying motivation uh, in all actions, but specifically talking here about practice? What is my true desire? And there can be skillful desire and there can be unskillful desire, of course. Unskillful desire, unskillful motivation leads to more suffering. And skillful desire, skillful motivation and intention leads to less suffering. So why do I do what I do? What is underneath it? And this is such an interesting exploration. Whether we know it or not, there's always a motivation. There's always a motivation. Something is happening. We're doing everything for some reason. Again, it might be, most of the time, for most people, it's very unconscious. But usually our motivation for things is if we're not Dharma practitioners, if we're out in the world, or even if we are Dharma practitioners, it's self-motivated. It's sort of kind of around this bolstering or supporting, or a self, or attempting to create solidity. And much of our Dharma practice is about uncovering those unconscious motivations. So we might want to get enlightened, we might want to awaken, but why do we want to do that? Why is it? Because the self doesn't become awake, the self doesn't become enlightened. What is this all about? So it's very worthwhile to examine this because our motivations have a dramatic and very powerful effect on our practice, but not just on our practice, but our lives and the karma and our karma, how we condition our future. And karma works on this very deep level, on this level of motivation. It doesn't work on the level of necessarily action, because things can look much different than they actually are. So appearances don't always tell the whole story, and many times appearances don't tell the story at all. And so this is why we can practice for years and years and years and still generate suffering. There's many reasons that can happen, but this could be one of those reasons why we practice for all these years and we don't see a whole lot of change, because perhaps we haven't examined our motivation. So clarifying this is very important. I remember when I first got into Buddhism, my intention was very pure. I got in very young. I was 21, but which was 24 years ago, and I always kind of had this very spiritual inclination. I wanted to. I grew up with a lot of suffering, a lot of pain, a lot of things happening in my life, and I feel like my intention was very pure. I wanted to get into Buddhism to try to explore these territories. But what I found after a while was I was very, very much preoccupied with the aesthetic, with Zen especially. I loved the robes, and I loved the chanting, and I loved how it looked, and I loved the bowing, and I loved the kind of hierarchy that it had. I loved all of these things. And there was this sort of delusion that I was in, as long as I was kind of going through the motions and I was doing the stuff and doing the thing, that that was actually I was doing Buddhism. that there was something actually happening by going through those motions. But I continued to suffer. And if you've ever experienced what I'm talking about, if you've been kind of involved or motivated by the kind of surface levels of practice, that doesn't last very long, especially in Zen, because it's pretty harsh, pretty hardcore. And so I learned my lesson pretty quickly from that. But I've noticed it in other ways too, and you've probably noticed this too. How on the outside, we want to look like a good practitioner, especially around like well-known or respected teachers. I've noticed this a lot, like being around well-respected teachers. Like they walk into the room and people sort of sit up and start to look the part and do the thing. They walk really well. You practice better when that teacher is around. Now, there's something about when there's a well-realized teacher that does send an energy throughout the practitioner body that's really motivating, that can get you going. But I found that practice can be sort of motivated by almost this kind of narcissistic underpinning. I've noticed this in myself, how our practice can begin to reflect or be motivated, just like many things in our life are motivated by this idea or this attempt to create solidity in something that's not solid. An attempt to kind of fool ourselves into this way by going through the motions and not really going deep into why we do what we do. As long as we're in the community and we're kind of doing the things that, this is transformation, but that's not transformation. So our practice can unknowingly just fall prey to the 8 worldly winds. We all know these very easily. So gain and loss, pleasure and pain, praise and blame, fame and disrepute. And so, as I said before, our motivation can be wholesome or it can be very unwholesome. And if it's unwholesome, it just creates more suffering. And so getting underneath why I do what I do, why am I doing this? Am I doing it unconsciously to strengthen a self or to avert particular things, or because I get a lot of pleasure out of it? And I really, think that it all comes down to whether we're practicing to foster separation or to dissolve separation. Are we acknowledging and practicing from wrong view or right view? When we're thinking of right view, we're thinking of the three marks of existence. So there's the reality of dukkha, there's the reality of not self, and there's the reality of impermanence. And each, at least impermanence and not self, they point towards emptiness. And if we're practicing from emptiness, then there's no way that trying to solidify a self is in alignment with that. And so how do we dissolve separation, or how do we know where we're practicing from? I really love how the Tibetans approach this. And you'll see that the Buddha actually approached it like this as well, but it's not always emphasized in our lineages in the Theravada. In the lineage I've studied with, and I think for pretty much all the Tibetan schools, there's this constant emphasis, especially in the beginning, but really throughout, on checking in with our motivation. What is our motivation? It's like hammered home really strongly. And so what the motivation becomes, it becomes this radical shift from a self view or a self cherishing or a self-centered view into a more radical view of interdependence and a more radical view of compassion. And so we move from this place of separation and substantiality into a place of union and insubstantiality. So in terms of motivation, everything is done with a motivation to free all beings from suffering, or the bodhisattva path. And it's a really incredibly wise and skillful practice. And the reason is because compassion can't happen unless there is a view of emptiness, unless there is a strong belief in these three marks, unless we embody emptiness, because compassion is the very action of emptiness. And so when we come into practice and we're focused on compassion, we're focused on other beings, then this automatically points towards that emptiness view, and it automatically tears down the walls of separation. And so you do this over and 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 over again, and your motivation naturally begins to become other beings. Yeah. And that is an acknowledgement and an embodiment and an activity of union, of emptiness. So often it's talked about this union of emptiness and compassion. This is where they come together. And so it's an incredibly effective, skillful means. In the Theravada, we have in all the Buddhist practices, but grounded in the Theravada, we have the Brahma Viharas, right? Heavenly abodes. This is how the noble practice. It's an acknowledging others. Yeah. And so when I act When my motivation is compassion or it's for other beings, then I'm acting directly out of emptiness, out of the three marks. And all of those layers of separation start to diminish. But this doesn't happen by forgetting ourselves, because when we include all beings, we are all beings as well. Like, we're included in that. And so again, it can kind of become this separation view of me here and all beings there. But we're all of us are included, including myself. So it's this kind of radical non-dual understanding or seeing of our practice, of our behaviors, of what we're doing. And so the skillful means taught by the Buddha and other teachers can seem kind of self-centered in a way through a particular lens, but they're anything but that. When there's proper motivation applied, then it leads directly to emptiness, and emptiness is kind of the ultimate view. And so I really love this sutta here. I always run up against the clock here, so. In the numbered discourses in the Book of Fours, there's in 95. There's this place called this section called the cremation brand. I'm just going to read it to you. I find it really interesting. It says, "Bhikkhus, there are 4 kinds of persons found existing in the world. What 4? One who is practicing neither for his own welfare nor for the welfare of others. One who is practicing for the welfare of others, but not for the his own welfare. One who is practicing for his own welfare, but not for the welfare of others. And one who is practicing both for his own welfare and for the welfare of others." And then he kind of goes on to he sort of ranks these. Says, "Because the person among these who is practicing for the welfare of others," here we go. "Suppose, bhikkhus, a cremation brand was blazing at both ends and smeared with dung in the middle. It could not be used as timber either in the village or in the forest. Just like this, I say, is the person who is practicing neither for his own welfare nor for the welfare of others." So that's at the bottom. "Because the person who is practicing for the welfare of others, but not for his own welfare, is more excellent and sublime." So the second worst is the person who practices for others, but not for themselves. This is interesting. "The person practicing for his own welfare, but not for the welfare of others, is more excellent and sublime than the first 3. The person practicing both for his own welfare and for the welfare of others is the foremost, the best, the preeminent, the supreme, and the finest of these 4 persons. Just as from a cow comes milk, from milk curd, from curd butter, from butter ghee, and from ghee cream of ghee, which is reckoned the foremost of all these. So the person practicing both for his own welfare and for the welfare of others is the foremost, the best, the preeminent, the supreme, and the finest of these 4 persons." And so I find that really interesting. So it's, if you're not practicing for yourself, but practicing for others, that's the second worst. And then next highest up is if you're practicing for yourself and not others. But the best practitioner practices for both, because there's this understanding here of emptiness, that we are all beings. If I'm not practicing for myself, then I'm leaving one out. If I'm practicing just for myself, I'm leaving all beings out. But I have to practice here first. I have to love here first. I have to have compassion here first, and then that can spread out to other beings. And so our motivation for why we practice is so important. And so just something simple before we sit, I dedicate my practice to all beings, and the ending of suffering of all beings can be so very powerful. But even more powerful is just to move through life like that. Why am I talking in this way? Why am I doing this to this person? Why am I treating this person? Why am I going to do this? Why am I doing this? Can I try to do all things for the welfare of all beings, including me? Yeah. And so I encourage you. This happens every time I talk. I could go on for a very long time. It's 1 o'clock right now, so if you need to go, you can. But I'll just finish up with this. It can be a really, really skillful practice to just move through life and constantly question your motivation. Is this coming from a building up of myself, from a place of self-cherishing, or do I have myself and all beings in mind when I'm doing this? The welfare. That's a really skillful way to move through life. And so I encourage you to try this on, see how it works. So saving all beings starts right here and right now. So if you need to go, thank you for joining us today. I love being in Sangha. I love talking about Dharma. I love seeing all of you. And have a wonderful week. Hope to see you back here next week. And I'll see you again very, very soon. If you'd like to stay on and talk about this a little bit more or have questions, please stay on.